Chapter 16. To the Yellow Lotus and into the battle. Everybody, order your things. And don't indulge too much in liquor. Remember that we've got a journey to make afterwards. The captain spoke to his crew. Aye, Captain, the men replied. We were at a tavern, which was at the port. Unlike other ports, the port of Kenro was not barren. Shops lay here and there. It almost looked like a small market region was there at the port. There were 2 rows of shops and a path lay in between. The west end of the path led to the port, which was a few meters away, and the east end of the path led to the Kenro village. There were 3 taverns, and we had gotten into one of them. Lad, what would you like? Ask for anything. After all, you're the guest of honor of this feast, the captain said. I blushed and said, Please, Captain, I am not used to this much respect, I said with a smile. Better get used to it then. The respect is there where it is due. Now quickly order whatever you like, the captain said. I turned to the attendant and ordered vegetable soup and rice. The attendant nodded and turned to the captain, awaiting his order. I would have eggs and bacon. And yes, some finest liquor you've got, the captain ordered. Vegetable soup, rice, eggs, bacon, and our special red wine, coming right up in a few minutes, the attendant said, and went through a door in the wall a few meters behind me. The captain and I sat at a round table, while the crewmen sat at a long oblong table near the wall ahead of me. Apart from our 2 tables, the other 3 round tables were occupied. There were a total of 7 round tables and 4 long oblong ones. To the left of me lay the exit door. A man sat on a stool left of the exit door and played music on a stringed instrument, entertaining all customers inside the tavern. On my back lay an elevated, long counter platform, behind which stood another attendant, a female one. At the counter, 5 stools lay at regular intervals. 1 stool was occupied by a not-so-old man. He was drinking some liquor from a bottle. After a few minutes, our ordered meal arrived, and we started eating it. While we were eating, the main door slammed open, and a man in armor entered. He stood at the doorway for a few seconds and kind of observed the whole tavern before walking towards a counter platform. Upon reaching the counter, he settled down on a stool. Good morning, General. What can I get you? The attendant asked. Pint of bitter, please, the man ordered. The attendant nodded, whirled, and from the shelves that lay on the wall picked up a bottle. She poured liquor into a mug, full to the brim, and placed the mug on the bar's counter before the man. The man picked up the mug, gulped down some of the liquor, made a sound of satisfaction, and placed the mug back on the bar's counter. Rough morning, Judy, the captain said, shaking his head. What is it, General? Judy, the attendant asked. In the morning, I heard the news of a messenger who had come to the King Juye's castle. The messenger was from Katal and was sent on behalf of King Chan. The messenger had brought the proposition to own the land Yellow Lotus. He said that King Juye was the only powerful monarch with a mighty army. Someday, the Yellow Lotus would be owned by a powerful monarch. And that day had come. He said either enter into a fray against King Chan or let the ownership of the Yellow Lotus go into the hands of King Chan, the general said. What happened then? What our king chose? The attendant asked. The worst possible thing, Judy. The king has announced a war against King Chan. Once the messenger has delivered the message, King Chan's army will soon be traveling to the Yellow Lotus for a battle. The general gulped down the liquor from a mug and slammed it on the counter. A terrifying war looms over the horizon, Judy. I've got a lot of work today. Upon the king's order, I have to prepare my men for a battle. First, I will have to prepare a speech of courage to give to my men, the general said, and continued to gulp down the liquor from the mug. I had eavesdropped on all the conversations between the general and the lady attendant while eating. The captain and all the crewmen had finished eating now. We got to our feet, ready to leave the tavern. The captain went to the lady attendant at the counter platform and paid coin for the service. I stood with the crewmen. We left the tavern, and soon we arrived at the dock. Each crewman shook my hand and climbed Jacob's ladder. In the end, the captain shook my hand and said, See you, lad. By the way, what is your name? Frank Carter, I said. My name is William Caesar. It was nice knowing you, Frank. I hope that our paths cross once again, the captain said, and climbed the ladder. The ladder was pulled back in, and the anchor was raised. The ship began to sail and started to move away from me slowly. As I have read in Randolph's diary, the war will begin shortly, I thought. Then suddenly, an idea came into my mind. I quickly ran to the tavern where I had just been. When I entered the main door, I saw that the general had finished drinking his liquor and was heading towards the door. I stopped in his tracks and said, "Sir, I heard of the war. I would like to join and fight against the men of King Chan," I said. The general laughed and said, "Boy, war is not a game. Men lose their lives on battlefields. You would probably cry out a river over a little splinter stuck in your thumb, let alone feeling the pain of battle wounds. Please, sir, let me fight along with your men. I will not disappoint you," I requested. The general sighed and said, "Look, boy, I'm very busy today. Lots of work lies ahead of me, so why not go home and play with your toys? My men will be here to pick me up any moment now." Then suddenly I felt a strong quiver on the ground. "It's a quake! Everybody, get out of the tavern. The ceiling may collapse," the general yelled. 2 attendants and 5 customers quickly made their way to the main door. Soon, we were all out of the tavern. I observed that at other shops and taverns, people had done the same. They all stood outside. The quivering became stronger. The last shop in the south row failed to withstand the intensity of the quake and collapsed. Slowly, dark cloud began to brew in the sky and started to hide the sun. Soon, the beautiful, bright morning turned into a night. Little sunlight that escaped the clouds shone on the surroundings dimly. On the path beside the collapsed shop, I saw a giant, gray, muscular hand bursting out of the ground, sending the debris of soil in the air. In the next moment, the body began to clamber out of the ground. In a few seconds, a monster stood on the path. While screaming, the people began running for their lives. Quickly, I realized that the monster was from my last night's dream, the dream that I barely survived. But how could it be possible? How could the other people see it? Had the curse mutated or something due to the time traveling? The monster had no head, just a body which was covered in gray hair. With the ground-shaking steps, the monster then started walking towards me, bashing the roofs of the shops in its way. The monster had no eyes, but somehow he could see things. "Don't just stand there, boy. Run," the general spoke from a distance. I quickly shook off my mind and went around the tavern and hid from the eyeless sight of the monster. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning, and I heard a loud booming sound of thunder. After a minute, 3 wagons arrived, which must have been nearby. From a wagon stepped out archers. "These must be the men the general talked about," I said to myself. There was another flash of lightning followed by a loud booming sound of thunder. The men spread out and started to hurl arrows towards the monster. The arrows penetrated the skin of the monster, but the monster didn't even seem to notice them and continued to bash the roofs of the shops. I heard the footsteps becoming louder. I peeped from the wall of the tavern and saw that the monster had come near me. For some reason, it was chasing me. The soldiers continued to shower the monster with arrows. Before the monster could get any nearer, I ran towards the last shop in the row. Finally, the attention of the monster turned to the soldiers who were hurling arrows. The soldiers began to run, trying to get away from the reach of the monster. Another flash of lightning I witnessed, followed by the thundering sound. After reaching the last shop of the row, which had collapsed, I moved to the north row of shops. I hid behind the shop. I observed that the shop behind which I was hiding had the backside open. It was the workshop of a blacksmith. Inside the workshop, I saw something that immediately gave me an idea of finishing the monster. Inside the workshop lay a dozen long pikes of iron. Those pikes wouldn't hurt the monster, but if I combined them with the power of lightning, I could slay it. My father had said that long iron rods always attracted lightning from the sky. All I had to do was affix a rod to the body of the monster. Once done, the monster would get hit by lightning. I entered the workshop and picked one of the pikes lying on the floor. Most of the shops had their roofs bashed by the monster, so I climbed onto the second floor of a shop next to the workshop and waited for the monster. On the second floor of the shops, the walls facing the path were no more, so I had decided what I would do. Slowly, the footsteps began to become louder, suggesting that the monster was getting nearer. I hid well behind the sidewall. Eventually, the monster got into my view. It continued to walk down the path, ready to get past me. I saw no opportunity to stab the pike into the body of the monster. I needed to lure the monster to turn its back against me. I saw that the soldiers had continued to assault the monster with their arrows. A plan came into my mind, and I quickly climbed down the stairs and reached the ground. From there, without making myself visible to the monster, I carefully made my way to the west end of the path. Upon reaching there, I found a soldier hiding in the gap between two shops in the south row. Holding the pike, I crossed the path and reached him. I told him of my plan and the things he needed to do for me. He nodded and agreed to help me with my plan of luring the monster. I went into the nearest shop, while the soldier headed for the opposite shop. Upon reaching the top floor, we both signaled each other to wait for the monster to come. When the monster was between us, the soldier, as planned, made loud sounds and tried to attract its attention. It worked, and the monster turned to the soldier, its large hand trying to grab the soldier. The back was all turned in front of me, a fine opportunity to strike. Holding the pike in both hands, I ran towards the monster, jumped and thrust the pike into its upper back. The monster whirled and struggled to grab the stab pike for a few seconds, but its muscular arms were unable to reach it. I had landed on the ground on my feet, and as soon as I had landed, I had moved into the safety of a nearby shop. There was a flash of lightning followed by thunder. My plan worked. After the flash had gone, I saw the monster on its knees, and lightning surged through all of its body. I jumped in celebration of the victory, but my victory dance didn't last long. After a few seconds, the monster got back to his feet and started back to bash shops, hunt soldiers, and me. Why hasn't it worked? I asked myself. I was behind a shop, trying to peep from the side of the wall, looking for the monster, when suddenly my left shoulder was touched. I jumped in shock and turned around to see 4 soldiers. One of them was the one who had aided me in the assault. The trick has failed. If the lightning couldn't kill the monster, then I don't know what, I said in disbelief. Cheer up, boy. I know how to make your lightning trick work. The soldier who had aided me said, 1 iron pike wouldn't do. You need to stab the monster with more pikes. More pikes would attract more lightning. If enough intensity of the lightning hits the monster could be destroyed, the soldier said. I nodded. I have already told all the soldiers of your lightning trick. They all will assist you on the assault, the soldier said. The 3 soldiers quickly dispersed in different directions, and one accompanied me. The soldier and I ran toward the workshop behind the north row of the shops, the monster walking back and forth on the path between 2 rows of the shops. We reached the east end of the path and arrived at the back of the workshop. I entered it and grabbed another pike. I then moved to the second floor of the adjacent shop, and the soldier headed for the opposite shop in the east row. The monster was at the west end of the path. The soldier and I took our former positions and waited for the monster to arrive in the area of attack. Soon, the monster came into view, and as previously, the soldier attracted its attention by shouting and shooting arrows at it. The monster turned, showing its wide and huge back. I took a few steps backwards and ran with a full pelt. While holding the pike with both arms, I jumped and flew through the air. In the next moment, the pike rested and sank into the back of the monster, beside the first one. After landing on my feet, I quickly ran to the nearest shop in the west row and hid behind it. Suddenly, a flash of lightning came, followed by a thundering sound. When the view cleared of the flash, I saw the monster bent on his knees and hands. It was quivering with the lightning that surged through its body. After a minute, the monster clambered to its feet. What the soldier had said was true. Adding another pike to the back of the monster sure had intensified the lightning attack. I just needed to sink one more pike. I quickly climbed down the shop and got back into the workshop. After grabbing another pike, I reached the second floor of the adjacent shop and waited for the monster to step into the area of attack. The soldier was already in his position, ready to distract him. The soldier smiled at me and made a thumbs-up sign, telling me that the trick was working. The monster was furiously walking to the west end of the path, destroying each shop in its path and collapsing it entirely to the ground. The rest of the soldiers continued to hurl arrows towards the monster from hidden spots. The monster reached the end of the path and turned. It now made its way towards the east end of the path. We waited and waited, listening to the carnage the monster was laying on the shops. The monster was now in view, and the soldier flung an arrow. No sooner the soldier had done that than the monster turned to the shop the soldier was hiding in. It then slammed its fist into the shop, collapsing the whole structure and burying the soldier alive under the debris. I watched the whole scene in horror. Shaking off the fear from my mind and focusing on the target, I ran and jumped towards the monster. When I was approximately 2 meters away from the back of the monster, it whirled quickly and grabbed me with its right hand in midair. I thought I was done. The monster raised me high as if it wanted to dash me to the ground. By holding the pike with both hands, I thrust it into the thumb of the monster. The monster let go of me. I fell onto the right shoulder of the monster. I awkwardly moved to the middle of the shoulders and jumped down. When I reached the back, I thrust the pike. The pike made a fissure into the back of the monster as I went down, holding the pike and sank into the flesh. After leaving the pike stuck in the back, I landed on the ground on my back. I recovered quickly from the impact and clambered to my feet. I then began to run away from the monster. I had taken only a few paces when the flash came again, illuminating everything into bright light. When the flash had faded away, I had reached the north row of the shops. I whirled and saw the status of the monster. The monster was lying on its back. Its body was on fire. The foul stench of burning flesh tainted the air. The monster had finally been slain, but there was no time to celebrate. A soldier lay buried under the debris. I made a gesture to call for help. All the soldiers and the general saw me and rushed towards me. By now, the sky had cleared and the sun shone once again. As soon as the first soldier reached me, I told him of the man buried under the debris of the collapsed shop in the south row. He immediately dashed to the collapsed shop and started to move debris aside, trying to find his buried mate. Soon, other soldiers joined him, too. After 15 minutes, the soldier's feet came into view. "I've found him," the soldier who had uncovered the feet spoke. Other soldiers gathered beside the found body and began to uncover the rest of it. In a minute, the soldier was completely uncovered. The soldier was unconscious. The general bent down and touched the throat to check the beating. "He lives," the general announced. "Put him into the wagon. We will take him to Leon, the doctor. He will know what to do," the general said to his soldiers. With those words, 2 soldiers picked up their unconscious friend and made haste towards a wagon, which was at some distance from the east end of the path. In the next 5 minutes, the wagon was in motion, moving towards a village. 4 of the soldiers had moved away into the wagon. 6 remained with their general. While the soldiers observed the burning body of the monster closely, the general stood with me. "Phineas will be okay soon. Leon is very good at his craft. He will get Phineas up and running in no time," the general said. I spoke nothing but nodded. After a few seconds of silence, the general asked, "What is your name, lad?" "It's Frank, sir. Frank Carter." I replied, "Frank, I saw everything. I saw how you employed that lightning trick courageously and slew the monster," the general said. I nodded and smiled. "You said you wanted to join us in the battle? Guess what? Kid, you have just earned your spot amongst my soldiers," the general said, smiling. "Oh, thank you, mister." I looked for his name. "My name is Richard Cassan," the general said. "Thank you, Mr. Cassan," I said. "Despite your decent courage and good wit, which you have just showcased while slaying the monster, you will need to go through some combat training before you step into the battlefield at the Yellow Lotus. We still have at least 3 days until the enemy soldiers arrive at the Yellow Lotus. They will probably disembark from the ships at the seashore 30 kilometers west of the Yellow Lotus," the general said. I nodded. "Okay then, come with us to the castle, where I will begin your training," the general ordered, turned, and began walking toward the wagon standing at the east end of the path. I followed the general. Soon, I was inside a wagon. The general sat in the other wagon. Both wagons got into motion, and we began heading for the castle. The path was flanked by trees on both sides. For half an hour, we traveled in the wagon before we saw the first few houses of the village. The village looked very familiar. In the past, the village was not much different from the present. After a few minutes, we left the path we had been on and turned left. After passing about a few dozen houses, the wagons came to a halt beside a house. "Need to check on Phineas," a soldier in the wagon said, and got out. Others followed him too. At last, I clambered out. I observed that the first wagon, which had left earlier carrying Phineas inside, stood empty in front of the other 2 wagons. One by one, soldiers entered the house to the left of the street. Upon entering the house, I saw Phineas lying on a bed, his eyes closed, his chest growing and shrinking as his lungs breathed air in and out. A wet piece of cloth covered his forehead. The general was in conversation with a man, who must be Leon, the doctor. Your man will need rest for a few days. He has already come to consciousness. I have given him soporific herbs to help him sleep. I suggest that you leave the patient at my house so that I can monitor his mending, the doctor said. No problem, Doc. You keep him with you as long as you wish. I will notify his family of this. They might be here to see him, the general said. Very well, the doctor said. Doc, don't worry about the expense. Just get my man up and ready as soon as you can so that I can use his service in. Well, don't spread the news or there will be commotion in the streets, the general said. What is it, General? The doctor asked. A war is on the horizon, the general replied. A war? For what? The doctor asked. For the ownership of the Yellow Lotus, the general replied. Ah, the Yellow Lotus, the richest piece of land in the whole world. I knew someday this would happen, the doctor said, shaking his head. Well, who are we up against, General? The doctor asked. It's King Chan, the ruler of the kingdom Yuma. His army will be sailing from Port Katal soon. After 3 days of sea travel, they'll disembark upon the shore 10 kilometers west of the Yellow Lotus, the general explained. The doctor nodded. All right then, we will leave you to your work. Take good care of my man. Doc, the general said, turned and signaled his men to move out. Our wagons were in motion once again. We returned to the main path. After turning left, we headed straight. We traveled for an hour at full speed. Soon, we passed the last few houses of the village. Barren land was now on both sides. It was nearly noon. Another hour and a mountain of the castle came into view. I had never ventured beyond the village, so it was the first time I was seeing the castle of my king. Soon, we entered the outer wall of the castle through the main gate. The path leading to the castle was cobbled. Tick-tock sound was made as a horse's hoofs trod on the cobbled path. The 3 wagons stopped in front of the castle. When I had clambered out of the wagon, the general walked to me and, after putting a hand on the shoulder of the man standing next to him, he said, Frank, this is Jonathan. Go with him to the armory, where he will initiate your combat training. Right now, I've got some things to discuss with the king. I will see you soon, the general said and headed to the stone steps of the castle. He climbed the steps, entered the castle gate, and disappeared from view. Jonathan turned to me and said, Let's go, Frank. With those words, Jonathan moved towards the northwest of the castle. I followed him behind. Inside the castle walls lay a huge, barren land, upon which buildings of many kinds stood. Judging by the structure, they all looked like military buildings. Soon, we reached a building. Upon entering it, I witnessed lots of weapons. Some hung on the walls, and some were stored in crates. This is the armory. This is where weapons are kept, Jonathan said. I nodded. The armory was a big hall. There was no other man inside. The armory was barren of any furniture, except the weapon crates. Jonathan walked to a wall and picked up 2 weapons, swords, to be exact. He walked back to me and said, while handing me a sword, Have you ever swung a sword? I nodded. Well, that's good. I will see how good you are with it, Jonathan said while pointing to the sword in my hand. Okay, follow me. We will now go to the practicing ring, Jonathan said and started walking towards a door. We moved to the back of the castle. Behind, there was a large ring enclosed by a few feet of wall barrier. Jonathan and I entered the ring by climbing over the short wall barrier. Inside the circle, men practiced with each other. Some did sword fighting while some practiced with long pikes. We reached the center of the ring and began practicing. For about 2 hours, we had practiced. Okay, that's enough for now. We will resume the sword fight later. Now let's move to the archery range, Jonathan said. We climbed out of the ring and moved south of it. There was another building. Inside lay lots of boughs leaning against the back wall, which was in the west. Near the front wall in the east stood dummies, a lot of them. A few men stood behind a short wooden barrier, which was about 20 meters from the front wall and was as tall as to reach the knees, and were hurling arrows toward the dummies, trying to hone their archery. Go, pick a bow, Jonathan said. I walked to the back wall and picked a bow. A crate full of arrows lay at regular intervals from the left side of the wall to the right side. I got behind the barrier and in between 2 crates, picked up an arrow from the left crate and started practicing on dummies. 3 days had passed. Jonathan had arranged for me a bed in the barracks. By now, I had learned sword fighting at a moderate level. I was not the best sword swinger, but not the worst either. I had also learned how to fight with a pike. My archery skills had slightly improved. 2. I was somewhat ready for the battle. Besides, I had not expected to become like the fearsome beard at combat in just 3 days. I was inside the archery range, practicing. There were 6 other soldiers in the building doing the same. Suddenly, a guard entered through the open door, announced, "The general wants to see all of you. Gather in front of the castle with the rest of the men. And better get your weapons first," and left. The men picked up quivers, which lay on the right wall, and filled them with arrows from the crates. After wearing the quivers behind their back, the men, holding their bows, strode out of the building. I was alone in the building. Should I get a bow and a quiver of arrows? I asked myself. After a moment, I took the bow and a quiver of arrows. Wearing the quiver on my back and hanging the arrow over my shoulder, I quickly moved out of the building and made my way towards the front of the castle. When I reached, I saw that the men had already gathered in hundreds. I got to the back of the throng. In a few minutes, the general showed up at the front, his body facing us. He began speaking immediately. "My brothers, today a danger will rear its ugly head in our peaceful realm. As you may have learned, the army of King Chan will soon be marching to the Yellow Lotus. It is about owning the most luxurious land in the whole world. The Yellow Lotus lies in the front yard of our kingdom, and our king is not planning to let go of that land. That land can easily put our kingdom into the golden age. Once the Yellow Lotus is in our possession, in our kingdom, no one would have to suffer from poverty. All of us would have nice roofs over our heads. None of us would suffer from starvation. All of us would be able to live our lives prosperously for centuries. The kingdom Voldar and our village, Kenero, will be the richest in the whole world. Winning the Yellow Lotus, we would not just make our future bright, but the future of our children of many generations. At the end of the battle, many would not be able to return to their homes and see their families and loved ones. Those men would be given a hero's farewell and be missed forever. The king has the word that their families would be helped financially. Like a great warrior has said, better die for something than live for nothing. So my brothers, are you with me? Are you with me to win the Yellow Lotus and bring prosperity to our land?" All men raised their fists high and uttered at the top of their lungs, "Yes." The general continued to give a speech of courage. I, with the army, was treading on the path toward the village in the west. From the village, we would move south and make our way to the Yellow Lotus. In the front, platoons of swordsmen and pikemen walked. Behind walked archers. I had opted for the bow for my weapon, so I was walking amongst archers. Behind the archers were cavalry and knights, who protected the king in a battle wagon. The sorceress must be inside the wagon, too. Here and there walked elephants, and on elephants sat men with large drums, which they called war drummers. Jonathan had explained to me the purpose those drummers would serve in the battle. In battle, the beating of drums would spread battle frenzy amongst the soldiers, thus making them more lethal and hard to defeat. A scout had reported that the army of King Chan had already landed on the shore and was now moving east to the Yellow Lotus. We walked for 3 hours carrying our weapons before we reached the outskirts of the village. Instead of entering it, we took a path that led to the southwest and the Yellow Lotus. For another hour we walked, our both sides covered with trees and vegetation. We were getting closer now to the Yellow Lotus. Soon, we would engage in a massive battle. After half an hour, we entered a huge, barren plain. Yes, we had entered the Yellow Lotus. Since it was not the rainy season, the grass had not grown. We finally saw our enemies in the distance. Their armies were as big as ours, and the soldiers stood in formation no different from ours. The general of each army stood ahead of their men. Suddenly, Richard, our general, drew his sword, pointed at our enemies, and yelled as loud as he could, "For the glory." With those words, the drummers began beating the drums loudly, and the front platoons rushed towards the enemies with all their might. We, archers, stayed back, as we needed to maintain a distance to hurl arrows. The men of both sides darted to their enemies. The first lines of men were getting closer from smashing themselves with each other. There were 50 meters from the collision, 40 meters, 30, 20, 10, 4, 3, 2, and 1. With a bang, the first-line soldiers of both sides smashed into each other. Many soldiers died in the furious collision. Men had swords of their enemies through their chests, stomach, or throat. It was very violent out there and hard to watch. Those who survived the first blood engaged in bouts with their enemies. Swordman fought swordman. Pikeman fought pikeman. Each archer, including me, was protected by a man with a shield. My protector was Jonathan. Suddenly, a dark cloud rose in the distance and began to move towards us. It blocked the sun as it moved closer. After a few seconds, Jonathan, who stood in front of me, yelled at the top of his lungs, "Bow attacks incoming! Take cover!" No sooner had Jonathan said that than all archers are behind the shields their protectors held. "Get in here, Frank!" Jonathan yelled. I understood his short message and hid behind him under the large shield. In the next moment, there was a shower of arrows. I heard sounds of arrows ramming against the shield of Jonathan, making the shield jolt with the force of the arrows. For a few seconds, the rain of arrows continued. When it had finished, "Now, it's our turn," Jonathan said, and got out of protection of the shield. He then brought out his sword and swept its edge with force along the surface of the shield, clearing his shield from arrows. Other protectors did the same. "Archers, get ready for the counterattack," Jonathan yelled. All of the archers picked arrows from their quivers. I did the same. "Aim," Jonathan ordered. All of the archers and I loaded their arrows into the bows and drew them back against the bowstrings. As soon as Jonathan yelled fire, all the archers let go of the tensioned bowstrings. In the next moment, all of the arrows darted in the sky, forming the same cloud that had been sent by our enemies. Somewhere in that deadly cloud was my arrow, too. The cloud moved toward the enemies and engulfed them. It was hard to tell if the cloud took down any of the enemies since we stood far from them. Soon, another wave of arrows crashed down on us. We got under the shields and tried to avoid arrows, but this time we weren't as lucky as we had been the previous time. Despite the great skill of defense, 3 of the protectors were taken down, leaving the 3 archers vulnerable to the next attack. They could try to pick up the shields and defend themselves, but they were archers, not knights or swordsmen. They lacked the skills of defending with the shields. One protector could defend one archer only, so they didn't have any chance there either. With none protecting them, they were now as good as dead. "Aim, fire," ordered Jonathan. Our archers and I flung arrows in the air. The deadly cloud moved toward the enemy and rained down arrows upon them. Still, we had no idea of the outcome of our attack. We soon prepared for the next incoming attack. In a few seconds, the cloud began moving towards us. 2 of the 3 unprotected archers had picked up shields and, holding them clumsily, hid behind them. The remaining archer just stood there bravely as if ready to embrace death. The cloud began moving closer and closer. In a few seconds, arrows crashed down all around us. I ducked behind Jonathan. I saw that a dozen arrows struck the archer who stood without any protection. Arrows penetrated every inch of his body: eyes, throat, chest, stomach, legs. It was very brutal to watch him die like that. One of the archers who had ducked underneath the shield was caught by an arrow in his leg. As soon as he was hit, he dropped the shield in pain, and immediately arrows showered him to death. Another archer who was protecting himself with a shield by himself was dead too. He had made a terrible mistake. He had held the shield on the rim. His finger had been caught by arrows, causing him to drop the shield and come out of protection of the shield. Like his dead mate, he had been hit by a barrage of arrows. For hours, we continued to hurl arrows back and forth. 5 hours had passed, and it was late afternoon. Judging by the sun, there were 2 more hours before dusk. By now, our archers had reduced from 400 to only 60. The protectors had died along with the archers, too. Somehow, with the great defense skill of Jonathan, I had survived so far. The enemy archers had been reduced too, since the incoming bow attack had become thinner. Far ahead of us, our swordsmen and pikemen had reduced from 800 to about 500. The war drummers continued to beat the drums and spread battle fury. Our general, who still breathed and had just won the bout he had been in with an enemy soldier, signaled for something from the battle line. Upon that signal, about 30 out of 80 cavalrymen and 20 out of 50 knights from far behind reacted and darted toward the battle line. Cavalry and knights both were mounted on horses and wore armor. Some of them held swords while others held long pikes. It would be hard to tell a cavalryman from a knight if it weren't for the color of armor they wore. Cavaliers wore silver armor while the knights wore dark black armor. The difference between them is that cavalry is of low rank, while knights are high rank. A high rank means being more skilled and tougher to defeat. Knights and cavalry entered the fray and started to slice and stab the enemy's soldiers up from their horses. Mounting on horses gave an upper hand to knights and cavalry, helping to put the lives of the enemies on foot to an end with ease. After a few seconds, the enemy sent their cavalry and knights too. Now, it was a fair fight. A foot soldier fought a foot soldier, and a mounted soldier battled with a mounted soldier. We, archers, continued to hurl arrows at the enemy archers and defended ourselves from their attack afterwards. Thus, the battle went on. Another 7 hours had passed. It was the early hour of midnight. Only 10 of the archers, including me, remained. However, we had completely taken down the enemy archers. Since there was no more need of protection that I required, Jonathan had left me to myself and had gone beyond the battle line to fight the enemies. The remaining archers had retreated to the wagon of the king and stood there guarding the wagon. The other 60-foot soldiers stood there ahead of the king, making a thick barrier for the enemies to overcome before the king could be approached. The bloodbath was everywhere. It was as exact as Randolph had said. Speaking of Randolph, I quickly remembered that he would show up on the battlefield at any moment. I had to warn him. I brought out the ring that had been in my breeches pocket. I held it to my eye level, observed it for a few seconds, and said, "I hope that it still works." I slid the ring around my left-hand forefinger. As soon as I wore it, everything changed. Everything had become dark. Not even the bright moonlight shone now. Randolph had said that I would see his invisible presence in the form of white vapor. Well, I looked around but found no such thing. Maybe he is not here yet, I said to myself. I then took out the ring and tucked it back into the breech pocket. The pitch blackness was gone now, and everything was bathed again in the silver moonlight. Another hour had passed, but I saw no sign of Randolph around. However, I continued to wear the ring and check for the white vapor. By the way, there was some bad news. Our men were dying and being outnumbered by the enemy. We were losing the war, just like Randolph had said. As I watched our men fighting the odds, 3 of the enemy soldiers darted toward me from beyond the battle line. I stood at the exact spot that I had been before, which was about 50 meters from the battle line. Since it would be very expensive to give armor to each foot soldier was vulnerable to range attack. Only soldiers of high rank had been equipped with armor. The 2 men who were rushing towards me were bare of any armor, suggesting that they were soldiers of low rank. What do I do now? I said to myself, I didn't want to kill any man, but if I didn't, I would be killed. Before those 3 men could gain on me, with no choice, I quickly picked an arrow from my quiver and hurled it towards one of the 3 men. The arrow caught the man in his stomach. He staggered and dropped his sword before collapsing to his knees, holding the wound with both of his hands. I picked another arrow from behind my right shoulder and hurled it at another man. The arrow penetrated the throat. The man staggered and collapsed to the ground. I had only 1 arrow left. I picked my last arrow and carefully hurled it towards the last incoming man. He had come about 30 meters from me now. Since he bore heavy armor, he must be of a high rank. I saw the arrow fly through the air and reach the target. But then something unexpected happened. The man swung the sword swiftly, and the arrow was deflected. My jaw dropped watching that. How did he do that? The man had reached me in combat proximity and brought down the edge of the sword over my head from above. I raised the bow with both hands, and miraculously, the attack was blocked. My head would have been sliced in 2 like a watermelon if the sword had made contact. I quickly stepped back a few paces. I then brought out my secret weapon that had saved my life on multiple occasions. The enemy gave a grin upon seeing my knife, but in the next moment, his grin was wiped away when my knife shapeshifted into a battle sword. The man then rushed to me and swung the sword from left to right at my knees. As Jonathan had taught, I jumped over the attack. The man then swung from right to left at my neck. I quickly ducked and dodged the attack. The next attack came to my stomach. I blocked it with my sword. Unlike the last time, this time, I was partially in control of the sword. By partially, I mean the sword allowed me to make offensive moves. However, the sword continued to make defensive moves by itself. For about 20 minutes, we swung our swords at each other. I was exhausted now and needed to end this bout before I ran out of breath. I remembered a trick Jonathan had taught me. It would be a kind of cheating, but it would defeat my enemy. After deflecting the attack, I quickly stepped back, bent down and grabbed a handful of dirt. I then quickly threw the dirt towards the face of my enemy. The dirt caught the man in the eyes. Quickly grabbing the opportunity, I dashed to the man and with the butt of my sword, hit him in his forehead. The man was stunned. I shoved the man heavily with both of my hands. The force made the man fall on his back, sending the sword clattering on the ground. I immediately dashed to the fallen body and stood pointing my sword at the face of my enemy. The man stared into my eyes very seriously and said, while breathing heavily, "I lose. You win." I said nothing but stared back at him. "Now, finish me," the man ordered. I shook my head. The man said, "You don't understand, boy. The fight was supposed to be to the finish. I have been defeated, so I must die. That's the way it is. It's the code." "No, I shall not kill," I said firmly. "If you can't do it, then I'll have to do it by myself," the man said, shaking his head. The man then clambered to his feet, walked to his sword, picked it up, said, "For my king," and thrust it into his stomach. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. The sword had already penetrated deep into the man's flesh. The man crashed to his knees and vomited blood before falling on his back. I rushed to him and bent down to his lying body, my left hand touching the chest of the man. His breathing was slowing down. I stayed with him until his eyes rolled into the back of his head, and his breathing stopped entirely. I closed the lids of his dead eyes and made the sign of a cross, saying, "May his soul rest in peace." I got to my feet and, leaving the dead body, I focused on finding Randolph. I wore the ring, and this time the ring didn't fail me, for I saw white vapor about 30 meters beyond the battle line. I took out the ring and headed for the spot where I had seen the vapor. When I reached the battle line, I saw another man rushing towards me. This time, the man wore no armor, suggesting the man to be of a low rank. I stood guard and waited for the man to come. No sooner had the man entered into the combat distance than my sword took control of me and made me swing it furiously from right to left. The swing made a deep cut into both of his legs, crashing him to the ground. Leaving my enemy behind in agony, I rushed to the spot of interest. As I ran, all around me, I saw friends and foes engaged in one-on-one battles. Luckily, I reached the spot without meeting any resistance. I called out, "Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, show yourself." But nothing happened. I then wore the ring and saw that the white vapor was there no more. I looked around for a second. Then I spotted the vapor a few paces near the battle line. Randolph was heading for the sorcerers. Taking out the ring, I dashed to the battle line. Upon reaching, I called out again, "Mr. Smith, I'm here to help. So, please show yourself, Mr. Smith." With no result, I slid the ring again around my forefinger. But I saw that the white vapor was before me. Maybe Randolph is kind of surprised and bewildered that I knew his name. "Mr. Smith, you must not proceed to your current approach of slaying the sorceress. You will die for sure. I have been sent by you from the future to help you. You must listen to me," I said in one breath. After a moment, the vapor disappeared, and nothing remained except the utter darkness. I took out the ring and saw Randolph standing before me. "Is it true what you say, boy?" Randolph asked. "Very true, Mr. Smith. Otherwise, how would I know your name and your agenda?" I replied. Randolph nodded thoughtfully. "If that's true, then how would you propose to lift the curse? Boy, do you see any better way?" Randolph asked. "Yes, I have already thought of a plan. Instead of killing King Juye's sorceress, why not help King Juye to conquer the Yellow Lotus? If King Juye wins the battle, he will have no need to order his sorceress to lay the curse on the land. I'm certain that with the help of my magical sword, which you have enchanted, and your magic, we can defeat the army of King Chan. Once that is done, you can teleport us out of here and back to the future," I explained. "Sounds good to me," Randolph agreed after a moment of thinking. Randolph picked a sword that lay near him on the ground and said, "Better retreat a few paces back of the battle line." I obeyed, and we walked a few paces back of the battle line and stood waiting for any enemy from the friendly turf. After 15 minutes of waiting, 8 enemies rushed towards us from beyond the battle line. "Brace yourself, boy," Randolph said. "Mr. Smith, could you do one thing?" I asked. What? Randolph said, could we just take down our enemies without killing them? I want the bloodshed to be as little as possible, I requested. I'll see what I can do, Randolph said. When the men reached about 10 meters from us, Randolph thrust his left hand forward. No sooner he had done that than two of the rushing men were hurled behind very furiously. They flew in the air for almost 30 meters before crashing to the ground. After hitting the ground, the soldiers didn't get up. They had been knocked cold. By now, the remaining 6 soldiers had closed on us from all directions. Randolph and I took positions with our backs facing each other. 3 men faced me, and 3 faced Randolph. Nobody wore any armor, so they ought to be of low ranks. The middle man thrust his sword towards me. My magical sword parried the attack and swung itself from left to right. The man dashed back and evaded my attack. The left one now brought down his sword on my head from above. I dodged left and avoided contact. After dodging, as the man had not recovered from his attack yet, with all the strength I could muster, I quickly shifted the sword into my left hand and punched with my right fist into the face of the man. The man staggered backwards and fell on his back. The right one now swung his sword from left to right, and so on. My blade successfully parried each of the attacks. After parrying the last attack, I kicked the man hard in his chest. The man was shoved backwards a few paces. I then used the same dirty trick and threw dirt into the face of the middleman who stood the nearest to me. I rushed to the middleman and hit his forehead with a mighty blow with the butt of my sword. The man's eyes closed in pain, and he fell on his back. When the dust had cleared from the air, the man, whom I had kicked and shoved backwards, dashed to me and grabbed me by my neck. I struggled to get free of his hold, but the grip was powerful. He then snatched my sword from my right hand and threw it on the ground. He raised his sword and prepared to sink the whole of it into my throat. I closed my eyes and, holding my breath, prepared myself to feel the sharp edge of the sword into my throat. But then, suddenly, a heavy wind blew past me from my right, and the grip was immediately released. I opened my eyes to see what exactly happened. I saw the man flying through the air. His body was curled as he flew through the air for almost 10 seconds before crashing onto the ground in front of our soldiers. I whirled and saw that Randolph had his hand stretched forward. I assumed that it must have been his work. "Thank you, Mr. Smith, for saving my life," I said. Randolph said nothing but nodded. An allied soldier immediately walked to the lying body of the man and sank his sword into his foe's chest. From a distance, I couldn't hear the scream of pain that the man must have uttered. His body wriggled in agony for a minute before going still. After 5 minutes, 3 enemy knights rode their horses towards us from a distance. There was no part of his body that was not covered in armor. My sword quivered and shape-shifted back into the knife. When the knights had reached about 20 meters from us, Randolph and I both used range attack. While I hurled my knife at a knight, Randolph thrust his hand forward and emitted lightning that struck another knight. My knife made contact and exploded, sending the knight flying off his horse. As Randolph's lightning attack struck, the horse rose on its hind legs, sending the knight to the ground. The lightning surged through all of his body, making all of his bones visible. The lying knight shook violently for a minute on his back and went still. He was not dead but had been sent into unconsciousness. My knife hovered before me in a blue sphere of energy, just like in my dream. I grabbed the knife and held it in my right hand, ready to attack. By now, the remaining knight had reached close proximity to us and swung his sword from above. Randolph and I dodged the attack at the last moment. The horse moved a few meters away from us. The knight now stopped and turned his horse for another attack. We both braced ourselves. "Mr. Smith, use your magic," I called out. "I can't. My mana had depleted. I'm afraid it will take a few minutes before it is replenished," Randolph said. "Okay then, let me try with my knife." I spoke while keeping my gaze affixed on the knight. Holding the handle, I raised the knife behind my head and, with force, I hurled it towards the knight. Swinging end to end, the knife traveled to the target. But then, I saw something happen. The knight quickly thrust his left hand forward, and some kind of limpid, red shield of energy formed before him, which deflected my knife. Randolph and I dived into opposite directions and barely dodged a deadly attack. Randolph was caught slightly with the attack in his right hand. The horse got past us between us. The knight stopped and turned his horse for another attack. We had been lucky the last 2 times, but I doubted this one. The horse was 20 meters away, 15 meters away. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Randolph suddenly dashed forward a step, dropped down to his left knee, and swung his sword at the horse's forelegs. With a neigh, the horse crashed down, bringing the rider down along with it. The knight, half-stunned, tried to reach for his sword. Randolph quickly walked to him and stepped on the knight's hand. He then bent down, grabbed the knight by the neck, and raised him to his eyes level. Randolph then took out the knight protective helmet and dropped it on the ground, the helmet making a ringing sound upon making contact with the land. Randolph stared at the knight for a second before smashing his own head into the exposed face of the knight. The ferocious headbutt performed by Randolph immediately knocked the knight cold. Blood started to come out of the knight's nose and mouth. Randolph laid the knight's unconscious body slowly on the ground and walked back to me. I had already got my knife in my hand and was prepared for the upcoming attacks. For an hour, we fought the horde of enemies. I relied on my enchanted knife while Randolph used his magic and combat skills.